I'm here with Nigel Bickle, who's the Chief Executive of the Hastings District Council. Kia ora, Nigel, and thanks for joining me.
Oh, kia ora, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
It's good to chat to you. Nigel, it's been a busy old time for councils at the moment. I, I don't think I've seen a more busy time, I suppose, in the years I've been watching councils. We've had a lot of the councils going through, including yours, going through the long-term plan, where unfortunately the highest ever rates increases were handed down to ratepayers. How has, as chief executive of the council, how have you found the long-term plan process?
Well, I think for the council and particularly the elected, representatives, the mayor and councillors, probably the most challenging long-term plans that we've ever dealt with, and largely as a result of Cyclone Gabriel, and so really conscious that those rate increases, are significant and raise some real concerns for the community, and it's balancing that with also the need to get on with some of the critical infrastructure recovery, and from a Hastings perspective, obviously that really goes to the costs associated with assisting Category 3 property owners with the voluntary buyout, and then the significant costs of rebuilding bridges, roads and culverts in terms of our communities being connected and people being able to access those communities. And so pretty challenging, and I think obviously landing on those 19%, which were high, and obviously a big component of that is the recovery rate to pay for those transport and voluntary buyout costs.
Yeah, because while the councils make the decisions, you are the one, as chief executive, you and your team, you had to bring basically plans and options forward to the council. How difficult was it going through and saying, okay, what can we cut? What needs to stay? How difficult was that process?
Yeah, really challenging, but I think a really clear direction from the council that the budgets are entirely infrastructure and recovery related, and I think you see that in terms of the things that the Hastings Council's focused on at the moment. Obviously, we've just for our two-tiered community had the opening of the first major piece of infrastructure that's built with the Crystal Culvert. Obviously, we're up there with the Kahika Culvert under construction at the moment. For our other communities, with the Puketapu Bridge under construction, Risington, and Matapero in design and construction. Obviously, we've been busy in terms of selecting four suppliers with multi-year $100 million pipelines of work. We've just started all of the Taihape construction, which is 11 major splits. We're out and working with our other suppliers at the moment on Glengarry, Puketipuri, Dartmoor transport recovery. We are a long way into the rebuild of all of the culverts and roads in Kereru, with a focus on having all of that open by Christmas. So I think that a lot of the feedback we got, and we got a lot of feedback through the long-term plan about just the real impact of 19% rates increases, but equally we got an acknowledgement that what we were doing was pretty clear, and it was hard to argue with the fact that most of this investment is going into rebuilding our community's critical infrastructure.
Now, all that costs a lot of money. Yesterday, there was an announcement by central government that they were giving 4.45 million across the Hawke's Bay councils for the to speed the recovery. How welcome was that, and what's that money going to be used to? You got a portion of that.
Yeah, so really welcome, because I think that the reality is the infrastructure, you can't do everything all at once. The current sort of plan in Hastings is that it's kind of a 7 to 10 year program to rebuild all of the bridges, culverts and roads that were either destroyed or seriously damaged as a result of Cyclone Gabriel. And So it was very welcome that we got 1.5 million of the 4.5 million that was announced yesterday. That allows us to basically accelerate some of the current projects. So and I think the reality is whilst communities I think understand we can't do everything at once, communities are very keen that their community is given priority and accelerated. And you understand that for people that live in Dartmoor, that's or Puketapu or Kedadu, where with no bridge at Puketapu, that's created Puketapu North and South, or Kedadu, the additional 45 minutes that it takes to drive. Just highlighting the importance of being able to get on as quickly as we can and rebuild this infrastructure that makes our communities and our region work.
And I understand that a lot of work has been done behind the scenes in negotiating and just building those relationships with government. You come from central government yourself. What has your role been in this to try and basically get more money out of central government?
Well, obviously, I was involved on the negotiating team last year with Chris Finlayson in terms of negotiating the $500 million package with the Crown that went to the voluntary buyouts, the flood protection work. And so I think it's recognising that actually at the moment everyone's fairly constrained. So central government's saying, well, we're in a pretty tough fiscal position, and there's a real emphasis on delivery, and I think that's the right sort of focus to have. So right now, we collectively as Hawke's Bay got $500 million last year, and at its most simple, $250 million went to towards flood protection with the regional council to basically do that flood mitigation work to get communities that were categorised as 2C back to 1. Obviously, Napier and Hastings, the sort of $100 million towards the cost of the voluntary buyout for people in Category 3, and then a chunk of investment that's gone into support the transport recovery. So the focus has to be on delivery. So, right now, when I look at where we're at on the voluntary buyout process, I mean, we're less than a year from having adopted that policy and established the voluntary buyout office. We're currently 93% of people are engaged in that process, and 90% have either settled or accepted offers. And we expect the voluntary buyouts to be complete by the end of the calendar year. So I think in terms of providing support for those people to be able to make decisions and get on with their life, really pleased with the progress from a delivery point of view. In relation to the transport, as I say, it's many years that are in front of us. But when I look at what we have delivered, the Crystal Culvert, well on track to deliver the Kedadu roading and culverts by the end of the calendar year, Puketapu Bridge in construction now with an opening middle of next year, Matapeta and Rissington bridges, and having gone to the market and selected 4 firms to do the hundreds of millions of dollars worth of transport work that's in front of us. But there's still some funding uncertainty, Andrew, when we look out over probably years 4 to 10, that isn't currently funded. And that's the work that's ongoing with central government. And I think central government rightly signals we'll make those decisions. We've both got fiscal constraints, but everything is about delivery and demonstrating value for money and delivery. Yeah. And I think those are the right steps to have in place.
Yeah. Now, one of the odd situations that has arisen is the Havelock North streams, where you have a situation where the regional council, which doesn't own them and doesn't maintain or control them, is now picking up a tab for the sort of rebuild or whatever, if you like, of that. I understand that they approached you and you simply said no. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think be careful here, because I don't want to buy into a Hastings versus regional council argument.
Sure.
I'll take it back simply to I thought what we did really well as Hawke's Bay a year ago was we in a joined up way agreed an approach with the Crown, and at its most simple, we didn't spend a lot of time arguing about who was responsible for what. At its most simple, the agreement, and that document's publicly available, said the district councils will take responsibility for dealing with people that have been categorised as Category 3 and take responsibilities for the voluntary buyouts. Now, what that's meant from a Hastings point of view is we had to, and we consulted our community, we've taken on $50 million worth of debt as our contribution towards those voluntary buyout costs, and then had to work out how to rate the community. And so residents of Hastings will know we've got a 6% and a 4% targeted rate to pay. Everyone's paying for those costs. The agreement with the Crown that was signed in August last year said $247 million worth of flood mitigation work would be the responsibility of the regional council. $203 million of that comes from the Crown, and $44 million comes from regional council, and that was the agreement made. So I've simply said, look, I understand the challenges of that you've then got to work out how to rate people, but that was the commitment that we made a year ago, is that you would take responsibility for funding the flood mitigation work, and that included the $10 million for the Havelock North streams, of which you had to put 25% of those costs forward from regional council.
Yeah, because some councils and some people within council have described it as swallowing a dead rat, because they were in a situation where they couldn't really do anything about it. The unfortunate thing is the people that still have to pay for it, whether they're still the ratepayers, whether that's Hastings District or Hastings Regional Council. So basically the Hastings Regional Council ratepayers will be paying for that.
Yes, and look, the focus, for us has been, a really strong focus on the 38 property owners that live along the Mangaro stream that are currently 2C property owners. What Hastings Council did was accepting that we had a funding agreement. We've got on and done the work. We have set up a community advisory group that had its first meeting on Monday night. We've got a program business case in front of government now for the $10 million expenditure, and we've got a 2-year program of work in terms of enhanced maintenance and a whole series of work that's designed to make the necessary improvements so those property owners can go back to Category 1. So that's been our focus, and whilst I know that there's been a bit of public noise following the regional council's meeting around that they had to make a decision how they would go to meet the funding commitments that they signed up to. And as I understand it, that's a general rate, targeted rate that will go across Hastings Regional Council ratepayers. As the focus is about getting on and helping those property owners get from 2C to 1.
So this is just the hurly-burly of local government business and as a whole, the relationship between the councils and
I think the focus, the focus that we're trying to maintain is being joined up as Hawke's Bay. This is about helping our community to recover, and some of those that were really impacted. And the position that Hastings took with the regional council was simply to acknowledge that, look, rightly or wrongly, we entered into a funding agreement between the 5 of us and the Crown last year. And you need to honour that funding commitment, because that was the basis on which we all went into doing the work.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Now, a lot of other things are happening, and there's lots of buying and selling of land and everything like that. There was some controversy recently, or some interest in the media, about a property in Heratonga Street that you had bought at a certain price, $1 million, I heard, and it was sold for much less. What are some of these decision makings that you as a chief executive have to make in terms of taking a loss or that? Talk us through that sort of situation.
Yeah, so my job as the chief executive is the chief advisor to the council. So you need to be really clear that it's not my decision. It's a governance decision, and it was a decision that was taken by our elected representatives on advice from officers. And so, at the time, clearly, this council over a decade has put a lot of work into the revitalisation of the Hastings CBD. Notwithstanding, particular investments like, that was subject of consultation with the community, the $40 million that went into the strengthening and, reopening of the municipal buildings and the Opera House. So we, in 2022, had basically facilitated an outcome by purchasing the property in Hetatonga Street that was occupied by the Hastings Church. We facilitated an outcome that's been very successful in terms of the establishment of a sustainably funded homeless hub in Market Street. And when it came to the development of that building, we had through real estate agents and a few approaches, we had an offer. Now that site will be redeveloped, which we think will be good for Hastings. But yes, it's come at a loss.
Yeah. And Nigel, I don't know if you can just move there because your lights have gone off, I think. So
Sorry about that.
No, thank you.
You want to do that again? Do that one again, Andrew.
No, that's all good. We'll carry on. That should be fine. Just in terms of how you buy and sell property, do you have a sort of a select group of developers that you work with, or is there an open tender process?
Yeah, no, we do things through open tender processes. So if we take Hetatonga Street, we had an approach through real estate agents, so that property was marketed. We'd had previous offers that had been accepted but fell over through due diligence, where we had offers that were conditional subject to due diligence. And when the council made the decision that's public now around the sale of the property for redevelopment for commercial purposes to Jonathan Wallace, that was one of two development proposals that were in front of the council.
Okay, so there's no preferred developer at all.
No, but recognising that in places like Hawke's Bay, you've got some pretty established property developers, and one of those is Jonathan Wallace. But there's no exclusive arrangements with any property developer, much like the recent publicity around the commercial land in Flaxmere. The council runs transparent open market processes around property that it owns, that it wants to have developed.
Are you happy with the price that you got for that property in Flaxmere, for that land?
Well, we'll disclose that in due course, Andrew. At the moment, as we've said publicly, we've confirmed that we've sold land in Flaxmere following an open market process. The arrangements of that are currently subject to confidentiality, but in the coming weeks we expect that the information will be able to be shared by the community, and I'm happy to have the conversation at that time.
Yeah, because I understand that obviously a supermarket's going to go in there, Woolworths, I understand, and but I also understand that there's another supermarket, FIFO, which is independent, fresh in, fresh out, who are also looking at going into the existing New World site. What do you know about that?
That'll be something that you need to talk to the owners of the Flaxmere Town Centre about. as I think we've been really clear with the community, we've understood for a long time that the community's priority has been a full-size supermarket in Flaxmere. We went to the market in an open way through real estate agents, seeking expressions of interest from developers on the 1 hectare of commercial land that we've developed in Flaxmere for a supermarket. We had one development proposal. We've entered into a sale of the land, but I can't say anything further at this time, Andrew, because we are bound at this stage by confidentiality provisions. But at the point that it becomes able to talk about the details, I'm more than happy to have a interview with you and talk about all of the detail. But at this stage, other than confirming that we have been to the market with that 1 hectare of land for the purposes of a supermarket, and that we got one proposal and we have entered into a sale and purchase agreement, that's all I can say at this stage.
Yeah. Now, Nigel, one of the big things that you came in with was social housing, and
Yes.
the record shows that Hastings District Council has done quite well in terms of getting people off the streets. I just did an interview a week or so ago with Napier City Councillor Maxine Bogue, where she says that Napier's got a housing crisis. How would you describe Hastings' housing situation, social housing?
Yeah, I started it from a big picture point of view. At the end of the day, a priority for our council has been as a housing market that works for everybody that lives here. Social housing is one part of housing, and so I look at the situation in Hastings now. When we started in 2019, we did have a crisis. We had 500 members of our community living in motels that the government was spending $10 million a year on leasing for the purposes of emergency housing. We had, I think nearly 800 people on the public housing register. So if I look 5 years on, we have, through the Hastings place-based housing approach, we've had over nearly 900 houses built across affordable rental, kind order, transitional housing, papakāinga housing. The most important statistic is that there's now less than 20 individuals in emergency accommodation in Hastings. So that's something I think we can be incredibly proud of, is that the short-term objective about saying, well, it's just not okay for families to be growing up living in motels as housing, we've achieved that. But we've still got a long way to go in terms of, we've got a shortage of rental, good quality rental accommodation in Hastings. The average rent prices in Hastings and Napier is not far off what you pay in Auckland. So I wouldn't describe it as a crisis, but I'd say, we need to continue to be really focused to make sure that there's houses that are available for everyone. Really proud that our council is about to build 40 new senior homes in Flaxmere, first time in 4 decades that we've been able to senior housing register. So I'm not describing it as, hey, geez, job's done. We've made some fantastic progress in Hastings, but we've still got a way to go. Obviously, in Flaxmere, we can point to the partnership with the Tai Whenua and the amazing job they've done with the Wainako housing development. Obviously, we developed 4 parcels of land in Flaxmere. One at Harvard Street, or Whāriki and Kurawai Cres. Those 35 homes were built, a mix of both social housing and affordable first homes for locals. We've just lodged the resource consent for 40 senior homes to be built on one of the lots at the town centre, and we've been in the market and we'll be announcing soon, hopefully, the sale of land at 244 Flaxmere Ave for more housing. And obviously we've got other 7 parcels of land in Flaxmere that we're about to take to the market, seeking to continue to see the supply of affordable housing across a mix of social, affordable rentals and affordable first homes, because that's what we think we need to see. The last point I'd make, Andrew, is that one of the problems that we had to own up to back in 2019 is that we hadn't zoned enough land for housing. And when you look at it now, we've got record levels of land available for housing, right across the spectrum. You've got obviously what CDL were doing with the Iona development in Havelock North, in addition to Brookfields. You've got the Howard Street development underway in Hastings. You've got quite a lot of land available in Hastings, and in Flaxmere we've seen Tamatea Pōkai Whenua be consented for a 460 home development at Stock Road. You've got Wainako. So we have record levels of land available now for housing supply.
Yeah. Obviously, this government's view on social housing is very different from the last government. And obviously,
Yes.
they've been putting pressure on Kaingaora, and there's sort of investigations and that. Has that made your job as a council more difficult?
No, I think look, Kaingaora's been a really important partner in the work we've done in Hastings over the last 5 years, along with the iwi, the Tai Whenua is Hastings' largest chip, the role of TPK, of iwi and mana whenua land holdings, Tamatea Pōkai Whenua. What I'd say is that we were engaged heavily because of our pilot. The Hastings Place Base was a pilot initiative. Yeah. We participated in the review of Kaingaora. We are really excited by the recommendations that Stuart Bill English has made to the new government, and because in effect in there he's saying, you should build on this work, and you should in 4 locations look to do something quite differently around this place-based approach. And Hawke's Bay as a region has said to the government, we would expect to be one of those 4 places if you adopt the recommendation that Sir Bill's talking about. Because I think one of the challenges, Andrew, in the space, and I'll share a story, when I met with Sir Bill and the review team from Kaingaora, I said to Sir Bill, geez, it's nearly 30 years ago that I met you as a young senior public servant in the first New Zealand First National Government. I recall vividly when Helen Clark came to power in 1999, and the flagship program of the Helen Clark government was called Closing the Gaps. The bureaucratic program was called NECBOP, Northland East Coast Bay of Plenty. In the decades that I was still a senior public servant in Wellington, setting up the Provincial Growth Fund, where were the priority areas? Northland East Coast Bay of Plenty. Where is the housing crisis been? Northland East Coast Bay of Plenty. I think we so need to do something in places like the Hawke's Bay, Whairāwhiti, that actually has a longer term focus than an economic or political cycle. And I think the opportunities for Hawke's Bay to set up an approach to housing working in partnership with the Crown that tries to survive longer than a short-term political or economic cycle are the things that, because these things have long time frames. They don't come about, they don't happen in 5 minutes, and they don't get solved in 5 minutes. And I think there's a real opportunity, and the leaders of Hawke's Bay have agreed that housing is one of the small handful of priorities for our community's well-being and recovery going forward.
What's the pressure on you to find ways to sort of cut costs and reduce expenditure and that? What processes do you have in place? I was speaking to one of your councillors, Michael Fowler, and he said advisory groups have been set up to look at ways of doing that. What's your involvement in that, and what are you driving yourself?
Yeah, so the council were really, really clear. They in terms of the long-term plan that's been adopted and the year 1 implications, expect me to identify $2.7 million worth of savings that have already been baked into the long-term plan. That's the focus for me, is to identify where those savings can come from. And the Mayor has set up an advisory group on 2 areas that are most critical for Hastings, which is a finance advisory and an infrastructure advisory. The finance advisory will be part of what tests, before it goes to full council, the areas that I've identified that are opportunities for council to, for me to realise the savings that they've tasked me with finding. Clearly, from a council perspective, when I look at the, as Mayor Sandra described it, our long-term plan is an infrastructure-heavy budget, which reflects, one, the realities of Cyclone Gabriel and the nearly $1 billion worth of costs in transport recovery, but also that Hastings is a high growth area now, and we've got big pressure associated with infrastructure to accommodate growth, whether that's residential or continued industrial development. So the other advisory is on infrastructure. When you look at it, if you want numbers, Andrew, 2 LTPs ago, our forward capital plan over 10 years was $523 million. The capital plan we've just adopted is $2.1 billion. It is our capital expenditure that drives our debt levels and drives our servicing costs. So the other huge focus is getting inside basically our capital planning, but also whether the way that we're delivering capital projects is the most efficient way of delivering that going forward. So we are very focused on having to, demonstrate value for money, and we know, just like households and businesses, everyone's having to make some tough choices and trade-offs.
Yeah, because you've got, as a council, you've got heavy debt. I mean, it's up to what, 400 million at the moment.
Yep.
Set to get up to almost 800 million.
$701 million is the forecast peak of the debt in 2029.
That's a hang of a lot of money, and recently you did do more borrowing in that. How do you curb that borrowing and actually find ways? Is there any flab there that you can cut?
Well, in the capital area, you get down to choices, and if you look at the, there's only 3 major areas of capital expenditure in our budget that's been adopted in the long-term plan, and that's 3 waters expenditure, it's growth expenditure, and it's recovery expenditure. And so within that, the job is to provide advice to council and say, well, it's you have to make choices and trade-offs. Can you afford to do this? When do you need to do it? Do you have to do it now, or can you do it later? And can you do it more efficiently? And we're looking at all of that. But right now, the starting assumption in the budgets that we've adopted, Andrew, is that we will rebuild all of our bridges and roads and culverts. But because what the council hasn't done yet, with the community is saying, well, maybe we can't.
Yeah.
And those become the really hard trade-offs. But right now, the council's focus and what we consulted the community on was actually rebuilding all of those assets in the 3 waters space. Obviously, as a council, post Havelock North, we invested heavily in drinking water. We've got some big renewals coming up in our wastewater treatment plant in Clive, and our biggest area of expenditure going forward in 3 waters is around stormwater. We're operating in an environment now with a government that's both got regulating on standards and going to regulate on price in terms of economic regulation. We're required to deliver, safer drinking water plans to those regulators in the next 12 months. And so this becomes the difficult job for governance, where you're saying, well, you have to be really clear about, well, where have you got some choices to delay or not do it, but what are also the risks or implications of not investing in these assets? And this is the really hard governance trade-offs that the mayor and councillors are having to make.
Yeah. Well, there's so much more I could ask you, but we'll leave it till next time. Thank you so much for your time, Nigel Bickle. I really appreciate it. And as I said, we'll catch up with you again sometime.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate the opportunity.